The AP themes are universal and can be applied to any time period. The one theme that is exemplified greatly from 600 CE to 1450 CE is the development and interaction of cultures. This time period is defined by the large spread of religions and an increase in trade. In Europe, for example, Christianity was a major part of the region, or in China, the revival of Confucian thought. Trade was becoming even more common, and the spread of Islam is evidence of this. Islam gained more and more prevalence from the benefits it offered in trading in the Middle East. Throughout the years spanning from 600 CE to 1450 CE, many empires rose and fell around the world. Dominant empires were common around the world. In China, Tang, Song, Yuan dynasties ruled. In the Middle East, the Abbasid and Umayyad. In Europe, the Holy Roman and Byzantine empires. In the Americas, Incas, Mayans, and Aztecs ruled. Other empires not spoken about in these videos are Mali, Ghana, Zimbabwe, the Delhi Sultanate, Shogunate, and Heian. The greatest similarities in this global region, in this time period, includes more countries trading and interacting with each other than ever before. This was made possible by the Silk Road being used, as well as Indian Ocean trade routes and trans-Saharan routes. All of these allowed for more economic interaction. Most areas also had a religion that dominated. The rise of Islam made its impact in having most of its followers in the Middle East. Christianity was found in Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Polytheism was still in some parts of Africa and South America. Though the religions differed, the fact they encompassed most of a state to help bring them together makes this a similarity. Another similarity is nomadic groups affecting these areas. Vikings ransacked cities in Scandinavia and Europe, making them increase protection in their cities. China had to keep the Mongols out, and the Aztecs conquered parts of North America. The greatest differences include the movement of people. While the Bantu movements in Africa were very peaceful, the Viking and Mongol movements were aggressive and took over many areas violently. Another difference is that some areas such as China had centralized states, while West Europe was feudal. Africa had mainly tribes, but some states and empires as well. America had a centralized state with the Aztecs and the Inca, and North America had Indian tribes. This time period, from 600 to 1450, is periodized this way due to many reasons. The first includes the rise of Islam and a major religion in the Middle East. Islam also led to the formation of many caliphates, as well as holy wars. Other reasons this is a separate period is because of the continuation of trade along the Silk Road, but also the beginning of new routes in the ocean in the Indian and West African areas. This period ends shortly before the exploring of the Americas. The further decentralization of Europe and Asia also is different, making it a different time period. This period ends before these areas became nationalistic and further centralized. Go.
The European and Christian world was a bit hectic at this point. The Byzantine Empire was a continuity of the East Roman Empire, but it had a bad relationship with the Roman Catholics to the west. Despite some setbacks such as this, the Christian world grew along some of the Mediterranean. Europe starts to become a bigger figure in global exploration too. Portugal and the Netherlands go around the Horn of Africa into the Indian Ocean to set up trading post empires. Eventually, more of Europe will come around to do this, but it's too early. This adds to the periodization of the time because it is the start of what will become a powerful exploring continent. The Crusades, involving so many European soldiers in the Eastern Mediterranean Holy Land. The expedition takes back their land from the Muslims with an overall failure, but they did capture places like Jerusalem and Antioch for a short period of time. Constantinople was also taken for 50 years, but led to more economic development for Europe through the Muslim merchants. Besides this, the Byzantine Empire was weakened. Another impact on the Western Hemisphere was the bubonic plague. This is a result of poor sanitation throughout the cramped cities. This pandemic killed around 20 million people. and eventually created more jobs for the future. Similarities were few for Europe, the decentralized, violent, poor continent, but there were still some. Feudalism remained the main system of most of Europe. A piece of land ruled by a king, which they gave some land and money to nobles for business matters. Then they would give some land to knights for protection, and they would distribute their land into smaller pieces for peasants in return for food. Catholicism didn't change Europe either. Die-hard believers did not change, and their outlet was still Bulwer. This system remained the same for most of the period before the Enlightenment ideals came about. In America, things remained the same until 1942. So all we need to focus on is what stayed the same. The people of South America were polytheistic and were heavy on rituals, mostly sacrificial. The Maya and Aztecs were the two main civilizations and had a strong corn diet and an agricultural economy. Both had independent civilizations. The Americas would stay relatively sane throughout this time period because the Spanish did not reach this world until 1492. Islam takes a rise in this period, which has an impact all over the world. The rise of Islam spread along with merchants and conquest. The original spreading was made by some hardcore state building and military conquest. Once that got people's attention and Islam rooted itself into the Middle East, Islam became the epitome of merchants. Merchants appealed to normal people all around the world, so it facilitated the speed at which the religion grew. Because of this, Arab languages became the languages of trade, business, and law. Muslims wanted people to support what they did, but they wanted to keep people who actually believed in the religion to the Middle East, or in smaller numbers, because the wealth distribution of Islam would be thrown off. Islam also created a decent educational foundation with the construction of universities, Islamic philosophers, and translations of foreign research. This helped to attract even more people to Islam. What remained mostly the same was the steady growth of Islam. Even during the Mongolian conquest, Islam held its ground. In fact, the religion has been growing and has not stopped. Islam is projected to be the world's most popular religion soon. Also, Islam didn't change the way it was spread, through Muslim merchants and trade. Women in Islam is a continuity because they had more rights than others at this time. They had rights to property, divorce, and much more. However, this doesn't mean their lives were anywhere as free as men. This had a steady position during this time period from the Islamic world from 600 to 1450.
China changed after a period of decentralization brought on by the fall of the Sui dynasty. There was not much time to transition in between dynasties, so it did not give much room for change. Once the Tang dynasty and eventually Song dynasty were established to reunite China, the push for growth in all areas was bigger than ever. New technology came about, like gunpowder, to change the way people fought with each other, and eventually how wars were run. Navigational and maritime tools changed the way people traveled to be quicker and more accurate. China also blended the Neo-Confucianist teachings of Old China with aspects of Buddhism and Taoism, bringing about a new culture. Urbanization came along as a result of more trade, which also pushed new cultural things like art. New interaction also brought about new forms of money, paper money in fact, and the earliest forms of checks were invented by the Chinese. These were called letters of credit. The Mongols, led by Genghis Khan, created the biggest empire ever throughout violent conquest. This unity facilitated trade along land routes because it had to pass no borders. Although short-lived, the Mongolian conquest would bring a period of violence but also unity. China showed similarities as well. After only a short period of decentralization, centralized rule was brought back, similar to most of Chinese history. The Silk Roads were still a great way for people to trade and interact. The use of these roads fell because of maritime trade, but we will get into that later. Trade growth remained a similarity throughout much of history, we all know that. During 600 to 1450, China had three main dynasties, the Tang, Song, and Yuan. With trade comes the interaction of cultures, and China was a major component of trade during this time. The spread of culture affected China by strengthening old Chinese ideologies like Confucianism.